Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and once again, we got a good one for you. Today, we hear a couple stories from Mark Livesay. If you don't know Mark, then you obviously haven't looked too much into Western big game hunting. He is the industry standard, the industry guru for e-scouting. Check him out, Treeline Academy specifically. But I want to thank Mark, of course, for coming on the podcast, but he has some great ones for us today. One that he considers his standard story, the story that is what Mark Livesay is, and that's kind of tossed around a little bit in the teaser if you've seen that. But beyond that, he tells us some great stories of bears, of wolves, of elk, kind of all over the place. So I want to thank Mark. I also want to thank you all for tuning in. And I'm doing something a little bit different this episode. I want to throw a request at the beginning, and that is share this podcast with at least one friend we're trying to grow. And the only way we can do that is with you guys. So thanks again. Now let's go ahead and let Mark tell you his stories. All right, Mark. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Glad to be here. You guys that record these podcasts late at night, you make me think about my schedule a little bit more.
That has nothing to do with me. I'm happy to do it in the middle of the day, but it's a lot noisier in my house with the two kids in the middle of the day. So this is when I can get peace and quiet and not put too much on the wife. So I appreciate you staying up a little late for us.
It's not that late. I'm just giving you trouble. So I really appreciate it. I appreciate it. Good to be here. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, man. So you and we've met before. I love what you do as far as the Treeline Academy, but I don't know if everyone who's tuning in necessarily knows who you are. So why don't we just kick this thing off with you introducing yourself, who you are, where you're from, how you got there, et cetera.
Okay. So I'm Mark Livesay, and I'm the owner of a couple of companies. I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. I worked for a company right out of college, and I worked there for 25 years. So what's really funny, I love to always tell this story, is like I have never applied for a job in my life of any kind. Through high school, I trapped, we hauled hay, we worked on farms. We just were really poor, so did a lot of work like that. And then went to college, played football, got lucky, didn't have to work through college. And when I got out of college, I had a job while I was in college for an organ tissue bank, transplant bank. And so went right into that for 25 years and then exited that and went right into entrepreneurship on my own. And so it's funny. I never really had another job, and I never really ever applied for a job. So I hired a lot of people over my existence. So I know a lot about that.
Just winging the interviews, being like, I don't know what to ask, but
I'm not going to get into that day, but interviews are just a joke here. I hire the people for who they are, not what they've done.
Exactly.
I've always looked for the go-getters. I always look for the really, same with hunting. I just love guys that get after it. And, I seem to find myself, drawn to those kinds of people. And I just love spending time with those kinds of people. So, honestly, that's one of the reasons that when we met at Elk Shape Camp, I'm really drawn to Dan. The dude is like so motivating. It's almost ridiculous, right? It's on a level that you can only take so much Dan. I'm just going to be honest. He's so intense, man, but I love it. I just love it. So it was good meeting you at the camp. So I'm originally from Missouri. So I think this is going to be my 33rd elk season. So I spent a lot of time driving from Missouri out to the Western states, right? And really I don't want to date myself, but 33 seasons already kind of dates me. So I'm getting up there now. But it's funny, when I first started hunting, people always love to hear this when I say this, like I drew New Mexico tag. I don't remember for sure. I think 5 or 6 times out of 8 years.
Wow.
Back in the early days. It was almost a given, right? Back then. And so I would hunt New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming.
Every year or just sort of cycle through?
Every year.
Okay.
I would hunt 1 or 2 of those states every year.
Okay.
And for sure, I always went to Colorado. I think I hunted Colorado 19 years in a row.
Wow.
And so Colorado was always a go-to, but every time I could draw Wyoming, which was regular back then, every time I could get a New Mexico tag, which was pretty regular back then. And so everybody always asked me, well, why didn't you travel to any of the other states? I'm like, I don't really know for sure, except for the fact that I had a hard time coming to grips with the fact that I was going to drive through a state that had elk to get to another state that had elk. So fast forward a bunch of years, my wife and we had some property in Colorado, and we were planning to maybe someday move to Colorado. And since I spent so much time hunting there, it just was the natural place I wanted to end up.
Yeah.
And we were coming back from a ski trip one year. Well, 7 years ago, we were coming back from a ski trip. And she says, I was working really hard. I was working 7 days a week. We own an event production company. We produce events, marathons, triathlons, festivals, air shows all over the country. So I was working 7 days a week, 100 hours a week, easily. So I was not a very nice person to be around. And I missed a couple of elk seasons. And that was really not good. And so anyway, at some point, I'm about ready to get divorced, to be honest. Everything's coming, unglued at the seams. And so we're on the way back from this ski trip, and she says, we're done. She goes, we're moving. She goes, you have 1 year. You have 1 year to get all of our businesses in order, and we're moving to Colorado. And then we're moving March 18th.
Wow.
And I said,
got a good woman there, Mark.
Well, at first, honestly, she's kind of said things like that before. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Sounds good, right? But it hit me, the time she said it kind of hit me like, okay, maybe we can do this. So 3 or 4, well, not 3 or 4, but maybe 2 or 3 months went by. She comes to me, she goes, what do you got done? And I'm like, what do you mean, what do I got done? She goes, we're leaving on March 18th. What do you have done? And I'm like, what? Are you serious? Like, we're really moving? She goes, oh yeah, we're leaving on March 18th. I said, well, what if we own retail stores? We own 3 retail stores. We had running stores. And we owned a bunch of stuff. And I said, what about all this stuff? She goes, you either sell it or we leave it. I'm like, just walk away, leave it? Yes. I'm like, okay. Well, I said to my wife, I said, what if we don't sell our house? She goes, it doesn't matter. We're moving March 18th. That's what I said. I said, what if this doesn't sell? That doesn't sell. She goes, it doesn't matter. We're going to leave it all behind. I'm like, okay. So it was a fire sale, man. We sold, auctioned, Craigslisted, everything that wasn't nailed down.
Yeah.
Not that we needed the money. We just knew we needed to make a new start, right? It was a clean slate. And we were pretty lucky that our businesses were doing at least reasonably good at that point. So we moved in a 26-foot box truck, everything, 2 kids and my wife and me, with all of our possessions in a 26-foot truck, one trip.
Wow.
And most of it, and I'll be totally honest and totally selfish, most of it was my hunting equipment. So we packed up. Well, let's back up. So as we get a little closer, we had always thought Colorado was the destination. But as we got closer, I started looking into it more. We've been making a couple trips, and I don't know, you're from Colorado. Colorado is not what it used to be 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be brutally honest. Denver is a trash heap, and the homeless, the drugs, I got nothing against the legalization of marijuana, but dang it, if you're going to do it, it better be more than one state that does it, because all the element moved to Colorado. And
I agree 100%. I moved to Washington actually the year that it became legal. And when I came back from my first trip, I was like, what the hell happened? It was like a 6-month period from this nice, clean town to just homeless everywhere. And that being said, still better than Seattle, but it was,
well, but you're not comparing too much.
Right. So, but yeah, I'm with you 100%. So you're not going to hurt my feelings, even as a Colorado native here.
So, but I love Colorado, right? I hated to see that. I loved the time I spent in Colorado, but the point is, it just wasn't what it was 20 years before. So I told my wife, I said, what if we don't go to Colorado? She goes, I don't care where we go. It's just not going to be Missouri. And I said, and we're going to move out west so you can hunt. I mean, and do what you love to do. So the main reason we're moving is so I can do what I'm doing right now. That was the sole purpose. It wasn't for a job. It wasn't to create a new business. It wasn't to nothing. It was a huge risk. We're leaving all of our businesses behind. And we didn't have a house. We had nothing when we moved out here. So I was looking around and I was like, of all the states that I kind of had not hunted, had not even thought about hunting, had not applied for any points in or nothing, was Montana. So I said, what about Montana? And so we packed up. Her and I flew out for a long weekend. We made the tour of Montana. We ended up in Missoula. We're like, this is it.
Yeah.
So
Missoula's beautiful.
A couple months later, we're in the box truck driving to Missoula. We moved into a rental property downtown, stayed there for a month or two. My wife found this great house that we have now. We bought it right before everything went sky high, which we got so lucky. And here we are. I'm living in Montana. It's a freaking dream come true, really, to be honest. So I've been here for the past 7 years. And then I got here, and I'm going to be honest with you. The first 2 months, I was in a state of depression. I'm in this beautiful spot. Now it was spring bear at the time. And I'd never hunted bear. I was a non-resident. I was still considered a non-resident, obviously. And I didn't know what to do with myself, to be totally honest with you. I mean, I'm used to working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
100. And now I'm doing nothing. I'm on the phone with my staff maybe once a week. They're doing a great job. And I had a little trouble adapting at first. So I got a bear tag. I went out. I'm from Missouri. I coyote call. I'm a big coyote caller from Missouri. Did a few competitions, love it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to call in a bear. And I went into grizzly country, my first trip.
Oh, God.
From Missouri, solo, thick timber, and start calling. And my first setup, nothing. My second setup, I killed my biggest bear to date and called him in. He came in. I shot him at 10 yards running straight at me. Jeez. And I'm like, oh, man, this is Montana. This is like, I was hooked, from that day forward. So that's kind of a long-winded introduction. And then, a few years ago, I created the tree line concept. We could talk about that at the end, but I created this Tree Line Pursuits and Tree Line Academy. And main reason I did it was I'm 57 years old. I've been hunting elk for 30 plus years. And I wish people would have shared a few things with me, right? I just think there's so much that can be given back, not handing it to them, but teaching them how to use tools, teaching them how to do it for themselves, because that's the way I like to do it. And so that's kind of how Tree Line and Tree Line Academy, how it came to be was my wife is telling me now, she goes, now, honey, be careful. You did the same thing in the event business. You started out with a few events, then you had 200 events. And she goes, you got to be careful in the outdoor industry. You love hunting. And now you're going to get to the point where it's going to interfere with what you like to do. And so I'm a little careful about it, but the problem is I'm a serial entrepreneur. I create businesses. I love the whole concept of it. And I just like it. And I'm addicted to it, to be totally honest. So anyway, that's kind of how I got here.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. We will go into Tree Line maybe a little bit at the end for sure. But I just want to say it is my favorite tool. I've actually been a subscriber of Tree Line for coming up on 3 years at this point.
Oh, I need to renew your account then. Did I do that already?
No, I paid for it after we talked in April. I was like, oh, it lapsed right then. So I fired it up again.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Well, you got anybody that got in with me early, I extended their thing. So
I'm happy to pay for it because it is, I paid for a lot of tools, and most of them I'm like, all right, well, that was good. Don't need to renew that. Yours, every year I'm like, nope. I don't know enough. There's so much. It's such a great tool. For those that don't know, it's just about e-scouting. We'll stop there because we can talk about it at the end. But it is my number one tool, without a doubt, Mark. So
well, I appreciate that.
Thanks for being who you are, because I couldn't put together anything even close to what you're doing. It's awesome.
Well, I get a little hate every now and then because they're like, dude, you're giving away the farm, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm teaching people how to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm showing them how to use the tools. I'm showing them what features to look for, but they still got to go out and do the work. They got to get in shape. They got to plan their trips. They got to hike their asses into the backcountry. There's nothing getting handed to anybody.
Yeah.
And, and the bottom line is I would rather share the backcountry with people that have some idea of what they're doing than people that have no idea what they're doing.
Absolutely. Taking your course is going to take up a lot of time. That's all there is to it. So people are willing to invest that, right? They're willing to invest in the whole spectrum of what elk hunting is. And those are the people you want out there.
It's not a shortcut. There's no shortcut when it comes to Western hunting, right? There's no shortcut. And if you want to try to take the shortcut, then you'll be an average elk hunter. And if you want to be an average elk hunter, you'll kill an elk 1 out of every 7 to 10 years. That's the average. And if that's fine, if you're okay with that, then that's good. But I wasn't. I wanted to have more success than that. So I became a student. I kind of became a student of the game. And my big advantage, to be honest, I hated driving every year as much as I drove to hunt 2 or 3 times a year to hunt elk. But man, it taught me a lot of lessons about elk hunting and how to do it digitally and how to do it electronically and how to use the tools that are available. So anyway,
and those tools are just continuing to change. So you're kind of the head of everything here.
You got to stay on top of it.
Yep. But that's enough of that. We're supposed to save that for the end. So we'll come back to it. But Mark, I know you said you had a couple stories for us. I know that you said one in particular. When you thought of it, you were smiling. So I want to hear, the story. I think you said you're known for. So
this is why I've told this story partially before, but I've never been on a hunting stories podcast to kind of tell the whole deal. Right.
Yeah. So, let's go. We want the nitty gritty details.
Okay. So I'm probably, I don't know for sure. I can't remember the year. That's what happens when you turn 57. It was about probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5. It was early in my elk hunting when I moved to Montana. It was the first few years. So I show up at this trailhead and there's nobody parked there. And I'm kind of like, okay, that's nice. It's always nice when you pull up to a trailhead. Well, you never know, right? You pull up the trailhead and you don't see anybody. You're like, oh crap. Does that mean there's no elk here? Or am I just lucky that I'm the only person thought about this spot? So it's a love-hate relationship with people, right? And you should take that as a lesson. Sometimes people means there's a lot of elk. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. Anyway, I roll in there. There's nobody there. So I've got my llamas, and I've done a couple of podcasts. So I've done a few things, but not many. And I'm pretty unknown as far as Western hunting goes. I'm kind of the new kid on the I'm the new kid on the block.
How long have you had llamas at this point?
That was probably my first or second year having them.
Okay.
Yeah, I got them the first year I moved here. I was on a waiting list still to get them, but my second season in Montana, I had them. So it was like year 2, maybe 3 at the most. So I was competent with them. I'd had them for a while. And that's really, I had been on a few podcasts, mainly related to hunting with llamas at that point, right? So I roll in there and this car pulls in, 2 dudes. And if they listen to this podcast, they're going to laugh. And they get out and they're looking me over. They see my llamas, and that's nothing abnormal. People see llamas, they're always like, what the hell? So they wander over and they start talking. They're like, are you Mark Livesay? And I said, well, actually, yeah, I am. They said, man, we just listened to a podcast you were on with the llamas. And so it was cool. We got to talking. They were from Butte and Missoula. So we were talking and I said, well, I don't want to mess with you guys. I'm really not excited about killing a bull just yet. I said, I've got the whole season. It's opening weekend. I said, I'm here just kind of check things out. So I'll stay out of your way. So we're going to go this way. And I said, well, I was thinking about going that way. I said, hey, if you guys want to camp with me the first night, and then I'm going to move on a little further past that. I said, but it was about 5 miles. I said, if you guys want to camp, oh, that'd be great. So I said, all right. So I don't know these dudes, I don't know them from Adam.
Yeah.
So we're hiking in and we're talking, and neither one of them have killed an elk, but they've been hunting for a couple of years. They just have not been able to get it together yet. And I don't know that they were the greatest callers at that point in their career, really. Because I said, tomorrow, I said, if you want me to call for you guys a little bit, I'd be glad to do it. I said, I kind of just want to see what's around, and I know where we're going to be camping. I know there's elk there. I mean, I just know there is.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay. Well, we get this camp. We set our tents up. Bulls bugling during the night while we're sleeping, like right by the llamas. I mean, I'm not so sure he wasn't in with the llamas. He was just bugling.
Yeah.
So we get up in the morning, and there was a little gap, right? I didn't hear him for a while. We get up in the morning and we're kind of moving around, and the bull lights up again. He's close, and it's still dark. And so we're having to be careful to not spook this bull in the dark. We're in camp and he's right there. And I'm like, oh man, he's going to smell us. I mean, I'm thinking shit. So I said, we got to just stay put. We can't move until he moves off, and then we'll go kind of after him. So he kind of moved off a little. We got on the trail, went after him. So we set up. We called that bull in. I called that bull in. I told these guys, I said, you sit here in this spot, here and here. And I guess when I moved, they decided to move. I don't know what was going on. So God. Bull comes in. I can see the bull walking back and forth. I keep waiting for the shot. No shot. I'm like, what is going on? And the bull's out there. So the bull just wanders off. He kind of loses interest. He wanders off. So I go up there, and they're like not where I thought they were, not where they were supposed to be. So I'm like, okay, guys. I said, we got to get, like, I need to know where you're at if I'm calling so I can move around behind you. So the bull starts ripping again. I said, let's go after him again. I think he's ready to do it. So we go after him. Long story. He's across the meadow, right? Giant meadow. He's on the other side. We can't cross it. It's too big. It's wide open. I put the guys on the edge. I backed up. I'm like, there's no way that bull's going to cross a wide open meadow that big, right? No way.
Yeah.
That's like the number one calling mistake. So I go back at like 150 yards. I can see through this spot. I can see out there, but I'm way back. So I start calling, and this bull jumps out of the timber, starts running across the meadow. And I'm like, holy, he's coming. So I can't see the dudes. And the bull stops. I don't know how far, but relatively close to the edge. And he starts back and forth in front of these guys. I mean, back and forth, pacing. And I'm like, waiting. And finally, he moves a little closer, and I hear a thump, thump. And I see the bull take off, and I'm looking at it through the trees. I called one time, and he's running, and he gets about halfway across the field, and he just collapsed in the middle of the field.
Oh, man.
I'm like, oh, that was so awesome. So I go up there, and the dude he made a 50-yard shot. It was a perfect shot. And it was his first bull. It was awesome, And
yeah.
So we're in bear country, not really heavy grizz country, but there's some here. So I kind of have this I'm a solo guy, right? I don't hunt with people very often. So we start to skin this thing out. I'm helping them a little bit, and I can tell already they don't have a lot of experience with that. It's their first out. So I told these guys, I said, hey, this is really the meat of the story. I said, hey, don't think this is weird, but I kind of strip down to my underwear when I do elk when it's warm because I don't want the blood on my clothes. I'm going to be in here for 12 days, and I don't, that's no problem. They said, I'm like, okay. So I take my boots off. Thank goodness I was wearing underwear because usually I don't. So I had some underwear on, some hunting style, underwear on. So I stripped down to my underwear and my boots. I got nothing but my boots and underwear on. So we two random dudes. I have no idea. I've already probably forgot their names. And
what's funny is like you. I mean, they run into you. You offer to let them camp. You call in a bull. You get it killed. And then, I mean, of course, they're not going to say to you drop into your underwear. But
yeah, I mean, what are they going to say? No. And so, and then we get started. And we literally make the cut to do gutless method, right? We make one cut down the belly. I think we're doing the belly, not the back. Anyway, the dudes both said, "Hey, maybe we should strip down too." I'm like, well, I said, I'm a big believer in it. I said, hey, we're out here middle of nowhere. I said, I don't care, whatever you guys. So they stripped out. So we're three dudes, don't know each other, totally down to our underwear. And we skin out that bull. We take a picture in our underwear. And I mean,
did you take that picture or did they take that picture?
We put the camera up, did like a selfie.
But like, I mean, like who has that photo? I
think I still have it.
All right. You're going to have to share that, Mark.
I'll send it to you for the cover of this one.
There we go.
So we took a photo and then we loaded up a meat bag, got everything ready. And I said, all right, guys, I'm going to do something that I probably shouldn't do. I said, I'm going to let you take my llamas and take this meat back to your truck. But you guys got to go to your truck and bring my llamas right back. Oh, that would be great. That would be great. I'm like, dude, if you hurt my llamas, because I'm kind of a new llama owner at that point, and I'm like, I'll be killing you. Right. So they took my llamas. I let two random dudes, I have no idea who they are. They took my llamas. We loaded the meat up. Llamas packed it back out, and we've been friends ever since. So
that's amazing.
It was a good story.
Even with you in your underpants, Mark, I'd love to run into you in the woods because
I'm in my underwear
analysis benefit.
I'm in my underwear skinning elk all the time, every time. Unless it's so cold I can't take it, right? Like,
yeah,
some late season snow hunt or something. But here's the deal. I mean, I know it's all funny, but in reality, blood is your biggest enemy when it comes to grizzlies.
Yeah.
I mean, blood is like, they're dialed to it. They can smell it miles. I mean, they find dead animals like quick. And so I want to stay as clean as I possibly can stay. Now, if I'm going to the truck, and I'm done and I'm not hunting anymore, everybody's tagged out, whatever, then no big deal, right? But if I'm going to keep hunting, or I'm going to have to spend the night and pack out the next day or make multiple trips, then I try to strip down every time.
Is this something that you thought of yourself, or is this something that somebody, a little gem?
Oh no, I've never ran into anybody that does it. And I mean, I'm not saying it's a, revolutionary idea. I'm just saying it's the way I do it to keep the grizzlies out of my tent as much as possible. And so, I've been with dudes that I was with a hunt with two other dudes, and it was their first elk. It looked like a serial killing situation.
Yeah.
I mean, these dudes were completely covered head to toe with blood. And they're getting in their tent. And I'm like, oh man, well, I don't got to worry about the grizz in my tent. But I mean, it could be a super dangerous situation for you.
I believe it. It makes enough sense. I don't think I ever would have thought of that, but I don't hunt grizzly country. So it's kind of like, just not something I've ever put much thought to, but it makes sense. It makes sense.
So it's a good story.
And now we know why we'll never see you on many of those go hunt videos, right? At least ones where you're successful.
I don't think they're going to really want me to do the strip down thing, probably. So
probably not, man. Probably not. That's amazing. That's an amazing story. First off, I'm amazed by how friendly you were to these two random guys. Like most hunters, you can't even get a hello from in the woods, but good on you, Mark.
Well, same thing. When I met you at elk shape, right? I don't really need to go to these elk shape camps and spend my weekends and do this kind of stuff. And I'm kind of retired. I don't really need to do what I'm doing really, but I love it. I love doing it. I love giving back to something that I just love and have a crazy passion for. And it's one of my favorite things. And
Yeah.
so I love it. And so when it comes to that, now I'm not saying I take random people hunting very often because I'm pretty selfish when in that realm. And I'm a solo guy. I've spent most of my career solo hunting.
Yeah.
And so people always ask me how much, and I guess I would say I spend about 100 days a year in the backcountry. I spend about 60 days a year chasing elk, 45 to 60, depends on the year. And about half of it is solo. So now that I'm doing more with Brian Call and Ryan Lampers and Gritty and doing a few go hunt things, and I am hunting with more people now than I ever have. And I'm enjoying it. So I'm kind of in a new season of my Western hunting career. So I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it.
Good.
And I don't mind it.
That's awesome. Well, I think we can move on to the next story. I do want to say, if someone out there is listening and you were with Mark Livesay in your underpants, I'd love to have you on the podcast and hear your side of that same story. Because it's perfect. That's the perfect story, Mark. So thank you. But what else do you got?
Okay. So I've got these two friends, and you say you want me to tell a couple stories where I have a couple friends that are a little bit on the edge. So I've got these two friends, and we're just gonna. They won't care. Josh. I'm just gonna go by first name, Josh and Ty. And most people will know exactly what I'm talking about. And so I was on a hunt with them for mule deer, and these guys, I mean, you never know what you're going to get, right? You never know. I mean, it's a total crapshoot. They're like, back then they're like father son. So it's like a fighting. It's like they fight
Bickering.
like brothers.
Yeah.
But they hunt hard and they're killers, right? Both of them. But dude, you just got to watch yourself like every second around them, because they're kind of jokesters and they're kind of like always looking for some angle or whatever. So these dudes are notorious for doing things. And so we're on this hunt and we stop, take a nap, and or stop to glass in the middle of the day and hang up. We're hunting deer and it's kind of slow. We're laying out in the sun. It's kind of chilly. We're laying out in the sun, and I'm laying there and I'm kind of half asleep, right? I look up and he's standing right in front of me, peeing naked. Naked, like pants all the way down, completely naked. And I'm like, dude, what in the hell are you doing, right? So he laughed, would go on, and I didn't think much about it. And so, didn't even think anything about it. So I'm going to tell a little more about this hunt, but I want to tell what happened with this. So later, like days when I'm home later, I'm on my phone and I'm looking at my photos. I'm going to post some photos, right? And I got a bunch of naked pictures of him on my phone. He took my phone while I'm sleeping and took a bunch of pictures of himself and had them in my album. So I'm like, dude, what the? Oh, I laughed so hard when I found it was so funny. And
that's amazing.
I should have kept them. I should have used them, and I didn't. But I didn't find out till later. But in the same hunt, so it's really muddy, man, and our feet are like, we're hunting in a coulee country, so the mud is like clay. It's like sticking, and our shoes are like snowshoes, right? There's so much mud. Yeah. So we're hiking. It's rough, we're hiking it, and we see these dudes. We see these other hunters, and they're glassing us, and they won't stop glassing us. We're like looking at them, and they look at us. They're way up there, right? So the dude, I didn't even think about it. I'm not even paying attention. I turn around, and he's got his pants down, and his butt. he's mooning them while they're glassing us. So he's
how far away are these boys, do you think?
Oh, they're probably 500, 600 yards. I mean,
so they're not that far.
Oh no, they totally can see what's happening, right? So I can tell by when I pulled up my glass, I could tell they were like, oh, they're frustrated. They're like, what the? So they leave. So they're on the same trail we're on. We can tell they're on the same trail. They're just way ahead of us, right? So a little later, we go a little bit further and we find this. We catch them and we see them like right in front of us, like about 100 yards. And it looks like they're carrying an elk horn and a shed. And we're glassed real quick and it looked like they had shit. Well, I'm going to give this spot away. In this place, you can't take sheds.
Yeah. Okay.
It's illegal.
We'll just say Colorado.
Yeah, whatever. It's illegal to pick up shed here in this place. So we're like, what are they doing with that shed? Well, they see us and they know that we've seen them. So we hike a little further. We catch up to about where they were when we saw them. And I happen to look over and I find this shed under the tree, under some bushes. So we pulled the shed out. We're on this cliff. We're on the edge of this cliff. And we know they're up there looking at us on the hill. We kind of see where they're at. And they see us pull this shed. And I pitch it off the cliff. And I mean, it falls like it's gone. It's gone. This is a big drop into like a never ending canyon, right? So I pitch it as far, of course I took a picture with it. And then I pitched it as far as I could pitch it.
A picture of yourself naked with it, right?
Yeah, well, I should have, but I didn't. So anyway, we did that. So now tensions are getting high, right? Between the two groups. So they're kind of waiting for us at this point. So we catch up to them and they're ahead of us. They don't want to talk to us. So they're just trying to stay ahead of us. And all of a sudden it's getting dark and we look out and there's a deer. He just bucks out, come out. And they're on him. Well, we drop down and we get on him first and my buddy shoots. My buddy shoots at this buck and they go out to get it. And I'm like, oh, dude, you guys that's the last straw. I said, these dudes are going to be, you better be careful out there. I said, that you could get shot. And so they go out there and I said, I'm going for the truck. I said, I'm afraid what's going to happen. I said, this is going to escalate. We're close to the truck. We're on the way back. We're about a mile away. So they go for the deer. I go for the truck. Those dudes are parked right next to us. So I get there before they do. I took a straighter line. Whatever happened, I ended up getting the truck before them. So I get in my truck and I pull on the road and these dudes get in their truck. They go by me like road rage, man. I mean, they cut in front of me, whipped the truck in, drove up, picked up their dudes, and then peeled out and went by us and left. So they were not happy about being mooned. They weren't happy about the shed that was illegal. And they certainly weren't happy about us shooting a buck out from underneath them. But these dudes were pressing our buttons. And but moral to the story, these two dudes, they're funny. And, I mean, I don't think they saw the buck. I mean, they weren't on it. They weren't aiming at it. They were just standing there. I think they were too busy worrying about us and they weren't looking around. And so they never shot at it. They didn't like we shot a deer they were going to shoot. But they were mad that we did shoot at one. Yeah. At least I think. I don't know what made them mad. I mean, it could have been a bunch of things.
Yeah. It sounds like it's starting to add up.
But anyway, don't take sheds in places you're not supposed to. And I'll try to keep my buddy to keep his pants on. So but
sounds like you got quite the chore ahead of you, man.
Yeah,
I understand why you hunt solo so much, Mark, because it seems like everyone ends up naked around you.
Dude, if you have friends like I got, you got to go solo.
Yeah, it sounds like it, man. Oh, that's good. That's awesome. I hope that those boys listen and enjoy you reminiscing.
Yeah, that was a good story.
Oh man, that's good. I thank you for doing a one of those quick ones for me. Those always make me laugh. You had my eyes watering. What else do you got? I know you said you had a couple.
Okay, I got one more I'm going to tell. This isn't really a funny story, but this is a welcome to Montana story. So I moved to Montana in March, right? Or April, right around, I told you March 18th. So I go on my
Is there any reason your wife picked March 18th? Like
it was 1 year. It was 1 year from when we went skiing.
Okay.
So she just set the 1 year deadline, right? There was no real reason for the day. It was just the 1 year from when we decided that we were doing it.
Gotcha.
So nothing else, nothing really. Honestly, if I had to do it over again, I would have probably changed some of that up a little. But anyway, so we move here in March-ish. And I have a bear season. I told you I killed my first bear in the first trip and the first called him in. It was like crazy. Even the people, when I went to check the bear, and they're like, now, how did you kill that bear? I'm like, I called it in. And they're like, what do you mean you called it in? I'm like, yeah, predator call. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I use a predator call. They're like, and you killed it here? I'm like, yeah. They're like, dude, you know there's a lot of things in that area that can eat you, right? I'm like, yeah. I was kind of looking around. The dude's like, okay, all right, whatever. So I had it in 100. I had the hide in a 120 quart cooler. So I told the dude he's going to put a tag on the hide, and I said, hey, you think you could grab the end of that cooler? And he kind of laughed. He said, you need help getting a bear hide out of your truck? Because I told him I'm from Missouri, at that point, because I told him the whole story, right? Well, I know I can get it. That's just a little bit heavy. He goes, well, did you skin it out? I'm like, yeah, I skinned it out. He said, okay. So he grabs it and he picks it. He says, well, how much meat did you leave on this thing? I said, none. It's the hide and the head. Now the head's on it. He said, okay. So we get it down, opens the lid. It's to the top. The cooler is full of hide, right? And he says, well, is there more than one bear in here? I'm like, no, that's the bear. He said, we got to lay that out. I'm like, okay, we got it out. He goes, he goes, now you got this where? And I said, I told him, and I said, I don't know. It's my first bear of Montana, and it was a little bit over 6 foot. And the dude's like, this is one of the biggest bears we've ever checked in. And I'm like, well, he likes predator calls. I said,
or he did.
And I come to find out later that the place I'm hunting, it's real hard to hunt, like for spot and stalk, right? It's thick. It's got a lot of old timber grown up, so it's real hard to glass. And there's just tons of bears in there, but they're hard to get. And there's grizzlies behind every tree in this area. I mean, it's grizzly central.
Yeah. So
that's why these really big mature black bears are in there. But really the only way to really get them is calling them. But it's risky, man. I've written a couple of articles. If you want to search, guys are listening, if you want to search for bear calling, and I've written a few articles on it. And I love calling bears. It's my favorite way to kill them. But it can get sketch. You got to be super careful. I was not that smart the first time I did it. I'm just going to be honest. It was not, my setup was nothing about that whole thing was smart. So anyway, that was a quick story. Oh, to finish that story up, I check in the bear. They're pretty impressed, right? Great. My wife and I, remember, we haven't been in, we're downtown Missoula, going out to eat, kind of checking the downtown out. And we're on one side of the sidewalk and some dudes are walking on the other side. And we get even with them and they look across the street and they're like, hey, there's the dude. That's the dude that called the bear in. And so my wife, we laughed but they remembered it. And so anyway, it's funny. So the guys down at the Missoula fishing game probably remember me from the calling in bear episode, but
that's pretty amazing. Yeah,
so
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I've had an experience where I was in a town. I was in South Texas. There's not much public land in Texas, right? So I managed to find a little loophole in the rules and found basically a riverbed to hunt. And I killed a real nice whitetail down there with a shotgun, double out buckshot. And when I took that in to, I won't say the name of the place because it'll give it away. But when I took it into the local spot to get it kind of processed, to get the meat processed, as well as a Euro mount done. Yeah. When I came back in to get that stuff, like, oh, you're the guy that was down in that river. Like all these, apparently, when you do stupid things, which I don't know if it was stupid, but it was legal. I'll tell you that. But people start to remember you. So I've had a somewhat similar experience, just people calling me out as being the guy who did that.
Well, they just remembered because how stupid I was on the calling in a bear in grizzly country, right? So solo in thick country, thick timber. So
yeah.
So yeah, so I was telling you this last story is moving to Montana. I came in March, got my bear, right? So I'm chomping at the bit. You know, I'm a new location kind of guy. And what I mean by that is I hunt elk in new places every year, all the time. Of my 30 years that I've been hunting, I've been back to the same spot less than you can count on one hand.
Yeah.
I just rarely go back. Even if I find tons of elk, which I'm pretty blessed, my system works pretty well. There's a lot of places that my buddies are like, "Hey, are we going to go back there?" I'm like, "No, no." And I'm like, there's new places. I'm a bucket list guy. I want to check off all the buckets. So anyway, I don't do a lot of boots on the ground scouting, right? I'm an e-scouter. I'm from Missouri. I can't do boots on the ground. So I've gotten really used and really comfortable finding all my elk hunting spots by digital methods, right? So, but I'm living in Montana. It's summertime, and I'm thinking, well, I should go scouting. So I head out. I go down to this place. They've got a bunch of elk. Park my truck, get out, and I didn't have llamas at the time yet. I'm first year there, so I'm packing in with my backpack just for 2 nights. And I go in and I see a bunch of elk right off the bat. So I'm glassing them up, looking at them, looking good. Couple good looking bulls in velvet. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. It's good, looks good. And I go a little further and I see I'm right on the edge of this private property. And I see a bunch of cattle coming my way. And it looks like they're cows with calves. So I see these cows coming. And then I see all these little calves with them. I'm like, no, no big deal. They kind of get the elk uneasy, and the elk kind of move off into the timber. No big deal. So I go a little further, and I'm setting up on this ridge, looking down at those cattle, and there's a shelf right above those cattle. So the cattle, there's a shelf, and then it drops down to another shelf, and that's where the cows are. Well, I'm sitting up there. I got a great glassing spot, and I start looking. All of a sudden, I see something black dart out into that sage. And I'm like, was that a calf? And I got my binoculars up. I'm looking. It was a wolf.
Oh.
It was a black wolf, which I had never seen one yet, right? It was the first.
Just a wolf or just a black one?
It was a black wolf. This was a pitch
Well, I mean, you've never
wolf.
Seen a black wolf before?
No, I had never seen a wolf yet.
Okay.
Even with all my years in Wyoming, I had never run into one. So I have never seen a wolf in the wild. Now, I'm not sure I haven't. I may have thought from a super long distance, maybe a big coyote may have been a wolf in Wyoming back in the day. But
yeah,
but I hunted mostly eastern Wyoming because it was closer to Missouri. So I really never made it up into the wilderness areas or up by Yellowstone or any Jackson Hole or any of that back in the old days. So anyway, I see this wolf and he's black. And I'm like, oh, that made my whole freaking trip. I'm like, oh, so I'm getting my camera, trying to get some pictures. And I get some pictures through my scope. And I see a gray one. And then I see another one. And they're all belly crawling. There's like 5 or 6 of them. They are crawling through the sage to get they're stalking those cattle. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to see him take down one of these calves right here. So I'm up there and there's 6 of them down there, 5 or 6. I don't remember. Couple blacks and then the rest were gray. I do remember that. So I'm glassing them and I'm about 300 yards away and I've got my spotting scope up on a standing tripod. So I'm standing up. I'm not really trying to hide myself very well, which maybe I should have, but I wasn't. I couldn't see from sitting, so I had it on a standing position. All of a sudden, one of those gray wolves looks right up at me. He just looks right straight up at me and sees me. I'm like, dang it. They're going to run off, And then all the rest of them started looking up at me. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Oh, shit.
So they're looking. And then they kind of just, all of a sudden, they sprint off in like every direction. Like 360. It's like they were talking to each other. And I'm like, they're gone. I'm like, oh man, I must have, scared them off. I mean, so anyway, I packed my stuff up. I start walking. So where I saw them is where I'm heading. I'm kind of heading that way. So I'm just keep walking. And I get it's getting dark. It's not dark, but it's evening, late evening. Well, I hear one howl. And I'm like, that's cool. So it was, pretty far off, a few hundred yards, it sounded like. So I'm like, oh, they're moving around. And then another one howled, but he was to my left. And then another one howled, he's behind me. At least I think they are. It sounds like they are. Dude, and they just started ripping. And I'm literally surrounded 360. Jesus. I got wolves all around me howling. Now, they're not doing anything, and they're quite a ways from me. So I'm like, well, crap. I got my camp, and I'm like, well, I got to keep walking. I got to walk away from these things. And it's my first year in Montana. I'm kind of stupid because I was a little nervous. I'll admit it. And I had no reason to be. I mean, wolves don't eat. I mean, there's never been a wolf attack, I don't think, in the lower 48. But anyway, you don't always think rational, right? I'm like, these things are really howling. And so it got dark, and I'm hiking. And dude, when it got dark, they came within, they were right next to me. They were just out of sight. Like I had my headlight on. I could see movement. Like I would see a flash here, flash there, but they weren't standing still. They were not letting me get a look at them, but they were howling literally 360 within. There's no way they were within 40, 50 yards of me most of the time.
God, no.
So
thanks.
I'm like, well, crap. I said, maybe I should head back to the truck. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm putting my tent up right here. So I put my tent up, I get in my tent, I zip it up, and these suckers howled around my tent, howled and howled and howled. And then about 1 or 2 in the morning, they just kind of gone and never did it, obviously never did a thing, but they were just curious, I think. And I went back to that same spot. Wolf season opened like on the 15th of September, whatever, for rifle. I took 2 days off of archery and grabbed my gun and my call, went back to the same spot and called 2 wolves in and missed one at 350 yards. And with a predator call, which was the first wolf I'd ever called in Montana at that point. But it was cool because I had never been that close to wolves. I certainly didn't realize they would put up with human that close. And they were totally comfortable with me being there, but they didn't do anything. They never showed one sign of aggression. Like I had never heard growling. I never heard anything other than howling and running around me.
Yeah. God, you're braver than I am, Mark.
But it was a little unnerving. I mean, rationally that that's stupid to worry about it. But at the same time, you're like, when you're in the moment, and if you've ever heard, have you heard wolves howl before?
I don't believe so. Not as an adult. Maybe when I was younger, because it rings a bell, but like I can't place the memory that I'm thinking of. So I don't.
Well, if you haven't as an adult, it is when it's that close. It is the most intense blood. I mean, the hair will, no matter who you are, you're going to wake up and take notice. This is not the coyote yelping stuff. This is the deep, guttural, eerie, like I can't describe it. I recorded it. So I turned on my phone and just hit audio recording because I knew nobody would believe it. Right. And I recorded the whole thing. And I didn't get him on video at dark, but I didn't really see him. I'll be honest with you. Once they left, I just saw flashes of them. They were so clever about how they stayed away from me. Like they knew right where I was at, and they just stayed out of reach. Right. But it was cool. It was a cool experience.
I bet. Yeah. Brittany Kitchton was someone I had on the podcast. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what episode, but she tells a crazy story about where she was out wolf hunting and like in this tall grass, she could hear them. They were calling to them. They were howling. And it was like Jurassic Park where she could see the grass parting, but there was nothing there. And it was the wolves just like moving all around her. And The two of you are braver than I am. That's all there is to it.
Well, there's no braveness. I mean, the wolves are not going to do anything to you. I mean, in reality, but in the moment, solo, I'm going to admit, I'm a
Yeah.
grown man. I like to call myself a badass, but I mean, I hunt grizzly country solo, right, all the time. And I was nervous. I admit it. It was
I believe it.
I come from Missouri. I've been hunting Colorado, no wolves at the time. New Mexico, no wolves really. They got maybe have the Mexican wolf, but not really. And then Wyoming, I was hunting the eastern side, which I'm sure there's wolves there, but I never ran into any. So I just really hadn't had that experience. And dude, it was a little unnerving for a little while. And I didn't sleep. I did not sleep that good that night. So
I mean, if I'm in the woods alone at dark and I hear a kitten meow, I'm scared. Like that's where I'm at right now. So I don't consider myself a badass. So I can understand. I can understand being nervous in your situation because that's. Whew.
Well, I wrote an article. There's another article of something if you guys want to search it out on solo hunting. I think it's on the Go Hunt platform.
Okay.
And being in the dark and being alone in the backcountry, I don't care who you are. It requires a skill.
Yeah.
And at first it was not easy to do. And I came out early a few times because it just was unnerving, right? And until I really grasped it. But solo hunting is a real skill, right? It's some people are better at it than others. Anybody can, kind of do it. They just got to approach it the right way. But man, at night, it's so funny, isn't it? How dark does things to people.
Oh yeah.
It's all the Halloween movies we saw growing up, I guess. I don't know, but somehow our subconscious, we can't hardly handle it, right? And I've had some bears in camp at dark solo, and you always think it's a grizz right off the bat. It's never a black bear. And yeah, man. Oh gosh, I've had so many stories of that.
I bet, man.
You sleep. Now, once I got llamas, having them around my camp and the way they bark and raise hell when anything comes, I sleep like a baby with those llamas around. But before I had llamas, everything woke me up,
Yeah. Yeah. No, being in the dark is, it's scary. I don't care how manly you are. It takes a little extra like brain power to just be like, no, it's nothing. It's a raccoon. That's what I'm hearing. Who knows? But, I don't know if I told you this. I may or may not have, but my elk season this year was awful. I fell opening day, compressed disc in my back, pinched my sciatic nerve, and like for 2 months I could barely walk.
Oh my gosh.
And here we are 4 months later, and I'm able to work out again. So I'm getting ready for next year. But either way, when I hurt myself, put in a couple days, probably too many miles, pushed it too hard. But my buddy that I hunt with, I was like, man, you keep going. You just keep going. I will be in camp. I'll lay in bed all day. And when you get home, I'll put on something pretty and make sure you have a warm meal. But he was like, it's dark and I don't want to go out there alone. So we ended up leaving, which actually was probably best case when I look back at it, because within 24 hours of us leaving the woods, I couldn't bend at the hip. Like I was gone. So I don't think I could have driven home.
Yeah.
So it's good that it happened the way that it did, but it happened because he just was like, no, I don't want to go out there alone. This place is scary.
Yeah. It's, but you know what's good for you, because you learn a lot. I've learned a lot about myself doing it. And
yeah,
you really have to come to grips with yourself. And, I think it's a very good skill to have. It's not easy.
Nope.
And it's not always, staying on your glassing spot until dark, walking through the dark to your camp. I know dudes in grizzly country. I know a lot of dudes that will leave their glassing spot. They'll look at their watch like, whoop, we got to get going. We got to be back camp before dark. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, dark is the best time to glass. I'm like, we're not leaving nowhere. We're not going nowhere until dark. I mean, well, it's 3 miles. We're going to have to walk. I'm like, off trail. I'm like, so we got our phones. We got navigation. And it is surprising to me how many, even with another guy, or another person that people are nervous about it, right?
Oh yeah.
Really, to be honest with you, you're way more likely to run into a grizzly in the daylight than you are at dark.
Yeah.
People think they're out on the hunt at night. Well, they're not really. And you're way more likely probably to run in one early morning, evening than in the pitch black dark. And anyway, that's what I tell myself anyway.
Yeah. I had a bigger problem with it my first couple of years hunting in Washington, but I didn't know anything. I wasn't even really a hunter. I just would go and sit in the field, and they called it bare field. So I was just like terrified. I think they were just messing with me. As I've grown as a hunter, it's still every time it's like, all right, give myself a little pep talk, but I get out
take
there.
Some deep breaths.
Yeah.
So I was
cool, Mark.
One last little funny story since
Perfect.
we were talking about that. We'll close it with this one. So I was on a solo hunt in Wyoming, and I was in a brand new area, and it's another spot I had come and scouted in the summer. And when I came in the summer, I had gotten to the trailhead, and there was a game warden sitting there, or fishing. I don't know if he's a game warden. He was a fish and wildlife guy, right? Sitting by himself in the car. And I'm like, that's weird. So I pull up, and he gets out, comes over. What do you plan on doing? I said, well, I'm scouting for some elk for this fall. He goes, well, that's probably not a good idea. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, we're trapping. We got multiple grizzly traps in here. We're trying to. We're way over objective on grizzlies, and we're trapping them right now. And I said, does that mean I can't go? They say, no, I can't stop you. I'm just here to warn you. And I'm like, okay, warning taken. I said, I'm pretty used to it. I said, no big deal. So I go in. He just said, now if you see a trap, you got to stay away. You just really need to stay away. I'm like, oh, no problem with that. So I hike. It's getting dark.
What does a grizzly trap look like, if you don't mind me
asking?
Well,
that's what I'm getting ready
to tell you.
In
my mind, it's a big old cage. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm getting ready to tell you that because I know firsthand. So I'm hiking. And, remember these traps, they kind of move. They're on trailers. So what they are is they're a giant piece of, well, I don't know if they all are, but these were like giant pieces of pipe culvert, like that goes under a highway, right?
Yeah.
And they have a big trap door, and they have a dead carcass in the front and the trap door, and then they can back up to them and pull them out. So a lot of times they just go down old roads and set these up, right? Yeah. So I was hiking down an old road. And so I get about 5 miles in, and it's dark, and I'm like, I got to get my camp set up. So I get my tent all set up, and I wasn't really paying attention, really, to be honest. I get my tent set up. I'm like looking around for some firewood, and I see these signs stapled to trees. It's like, looks like paper stapled, like a concert's coming to town, like on every tree. Like not right by me, but a little ways away. So I go over there, freaking grizzly trap zone. It says warning. Well, I'm like, oh, Jesus. So it's dark. So I'm looking around. I find the trap. It's about 50 yards away. It's got a deer carcass. It's got some kind of carcass in it. No bear in there. Doors open. Grizzly trap. Big ass trap. And I'm like, I'm camped like less than 100 yards from this thing. And I'm like, oh, geez. I'm like, well, so then I start, kind of negotiating with myself. So I said, okay, the odds are if the bear comes, he's going to want that carcass in that trap. So this is probably the safest place I could be. And so I slept that right there by that grizzly trap all night, and nothing happened.
Jeez.
And the next morning I moved on down the trail.
Oh my goodness. I was half expecting you to arrive and have a grizzly in the trap.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
But that night it iced. It was snowing, and it started icing in the middle of the night, and I didn't know it. So I was in a teepee, and I had my teepee up, and I heard the rain hitting it, right? And then it was quiet. And I'm like, oh, must have stopped raining. Well, it was snowing and icing, right? And I just couldn't hear it. So I'm laying in my teepee and I know about the grizzly trap and everything, and all of a sudden this ice sheet breaks loose from the top of the teepee and slides down that tent. I'm telling you, dude, I literally almost peed my pants. I mean, that gun, I never grabbed my gun and my bear spray fast. I mean, I was in the middle of that teepee with the gun cocked, staring at that door. I don't know why I'm staring at the door like he's going to come through the door, but I'm like, he's coming. Get ready. And then I'm sitting there, and because it woke me up from a sleep, right? So I haven't had a chance to rationalize it. And then I hear it, another piece slide. And I moved a little, and I'm like, what was that? I'm like, oh, it's freaking ice. So I hit the tent and a bunch slid. I'm like, oh, geez. So I didn't sleep after that. I did not get a wink of sleep after that. But
that's funny.
Western hunting's fun stuff, man.
I can imagine that everything you just told me, I could see myself doing the exact same shit. So, Mark, that's the perfect one to end it on, man. And I know I kept you up late here tonight. So why don't we, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. I had a great time. Hopefully the listeners did too. But why don't we set this thing off here with, or finish it off with you kind of telling a little bit more about Treeline, and then we'll let the people go.
Well, since we went a little long, we already talked about a little. So Treeline Academy is kind of my Western hunting solutions kind of outlet. So I'm working to, develop things that Western hunters can use. So the first thing I have is I've developed this e-scouting course, which you talked about, and it's about 30 hours. Like you said, this is not your run-of-the-mill course. This is not something you're going to do in a couple nights.
Yeah. I'll add to that. 30 hours is run time, right? It's not, you're not going to comprehend everything. I've watched several videos several times.
I can guarantee you that if you take the whole course, you're going to know a lot more about Western elk hunting than you did going in. That I can make that guarantee. And I built this for people that need it and want to use it. If you take it, I've always had this policy. If for any reason you don't think it's what you thought it was, it's too much, it's too little, whatever, I give 100% refund. It's been going for 2 years now. I have over 4,000 people have taken it. I have not given a single refund.
Yeah.
And not that I won't, but I've never had anyone ask. And so, I don't know that it's the best resource on planet Earth, but I spent 33 years traveling from Missouri. So e-scouting, if I know anything about elk hunting, I don't kill the biggest bulls. I don't even probably have the best killing percentage, but I'm pretty dang good at finding elk. And finding them is job one. You can't kill them if you can't find them, right?
Yep.
So
best archer or rifleman in the world. You don't have any elk in front of you.
That's right. You can be the best shot in the world. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't work on your shooting. Doesn't mean you shouldn't work on your fitness. Doesn't mean you shouldn't work on your gear. That's all part of the equation.
Yep.
But if you neglect honing your ability to find elk, you're going to find that you're the average hunter, or you're going to end up below average hunter. And so anyway, I created it for that. And then now I just launched. The latest thing is I had a lot of people saying, man, all these things you do in Google Earth, I really would like to do them. And the way I show and teach. So I just built these new toolkits for Google Earth, and it's hunting boundaries, fire zones, cattle allotments, public land, roads and trails, wilderness areas, migration corridors, everything, all the layers that you could possibly need as a Western hunter. They're all organized for the entire state, not just a unit, not just an area. So I built an entire toolkit for Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho are the 4 I have so far. Yeah. And those are available there too. But it's a brilliant
idea, Mark. I'll say real quick that the videos that I watched 4 or 5 times were the ones where I was like, okay, I want to make sure I get all these right tools in the right places. And you're just setting up the system to be perfect so that you can do the most effective e-scouting. And you've kind of taken some of that legwork out, which is awesome.
Well, for people that want to do it themselves, I teach it in the course.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I was getting email after email after email from dudes that were like, dude, can I just pay you to do my Google Earth files? And I'm like, well, and then I started thinking about it. I said, maybe I should just build them and make them available. So you know that you've been doing it. So last thing I'll say about it. So one of the problems with Google Earth is it just isn't built for Western hunting, and they don't update it very much, right?
Yeah.
So it's not designed for these big giant files. So when you start loading in fires and timber zones and public lands and every roads, and your Google crashes all the time, right? It's a big problem. I hear it all the time. So I solved that problem. So these toolkits, all of the data is on a server, on the Treeline Amazon server. And it only downloads it when you activate it. So the beauty of it is Google Earth is way faster. It opens and closes super fast. It almost never crashes anymore. And you can have all 4 states of data at your fingertips.
That's
Before,
amazing.
there's no way you could put all 4 states in Google Earth. If you had the actual data installed in the app, it would crash every day, all the time. I tried it. So when the way I used to have to do it, when I e-scouted Wyoming, I had to load my Wyoming files. And then when I worked on a Colorado hunt, I had to take the Wyoming files out, put the Colorado files in. You could never have all 4 of them in Google Earth at the same time. Huh. It would just choke, it would crash, it would have problems. So I really wanted to solve that problem. And so by making them network links and by having them on a server, it only loads the ones you activate. And what's great about it, it takes a few seconds, maybe even 30, 45 seconds, sometimes to load a big one. But once it's loaded, it stays in your cache while you're using it. So it only takes time to load it the first time you click on it, if that makes sense. I know it's hard. I know it's hard to describe on a podcast, but so those are the products I have done now. And I'm working on, so I'm big with backcountry meals. I love making my own food. Like I told you, I spend 100 days in the backcountry a year. My own meal is a big part of what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. So Ryan Lampers, my buddy Ryan, he's bigger in it than me. So him and I are working on a course. Our next course is DIY backcountry meals. And we just had our first planning session this past weekend, and we start filming in a couple weeks. So awesome. I'm really excited about that one too.
That's amazing, Mark. Well, super cool, man. And again, I said it earlier, it's my number one tool. Mark's not paying me anything here. He's actually giving me his time for free. I couldn't recommend what you're doing more to anybody, Thanks, particularly man. People that can't put their boots on the ground. I've started using it more and more as I started having more and more kids, because I was like, I just can't get out there like I used to be able to. So even though I lived in Colorado and I could drive a couple hours to where I hunt, it just your tool made more sense than boots on the ground.
Dude, I'm glad you said that, because for reality is boots on the ground, scouting for elk doesn't really make sense anyway. Because if you go early, it's fun to do it and get in shape and do it. But the reality is where they're at early season, summer is not always where they're at in September. And when you go out boots on the ground, you only got so many days. You can only see so much.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate. If you spent the same amount of time using the tactics that I talk about, the drive time, the pack in time, all the days you're in there, you spend the same number of hours, you'll have triple the success, because you just can't see all the country you need to see, and you might be in there at the wrong time. So I'm not saying it's not beneficial. I'm just saying a lot of guys have to be very strategic with their time hunting.
Yep.
I would rather spend my days that I can take off hunting and spend my other winter time getting my hunts planned.
Yep. With me moving to Texas, your tool is
you're gonna
number one, but yeah,
you're gonna have to become a master.
That's the plan. That's the plan. I just got to get settled down there, and then I'm going to fire it up and start scouting. I'm also taking this opportunity because I've always hunted northern Colorado. I'm not going to drive through southern Colorado where there's elk to go to other elk, just like you said, right? So I'm gonna start all new for me next year and hunt an entirely new area. So I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. I just need to not fall down and break my back.
Oh, geez, dude.
That's right. I'm better now. And my doctor warranted it as like, it's kind of like a flat tire. It happens. There's no particular reason, just unlucky. So,
yeah, man.
Well, Mark, man, this was fun. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed your stories, all of them, from terrifying me with grizzlies and wolves to your friends in their underpants and naked. So I think we really ran the gamut tonight, man.
All right, man. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Also, everything you mentioned, I'm going to put notes in the or things in the show notes for it, links and stuff.
I'll send you a couple pictures and you can pick. I've got
I'll
a couple in my underwear.
I don't want to get blocked from Instagram, but I'll post what I can.
No, there's no nudity in these.
Perfect, man. All right. Well, thanks again.
All right, man. See you.
All right, guys. That's it. Another couple stories in the books. I want to thank Mark Livesay, of course, of Treeland Pursuits, Treeland Academy, for coming on. I've put links to everything that he mentioned in the show notes, a couple of his articles, his website, etc. Obviously, Mark's a hot commodity. I'm very happy that he was willing to come on. In fact, he's one of the first people to commit to coming on, so thank you again, Mark. As for you listeners, I hope you listened to the homework that was actually at the beginning of the episode, and I've already shared this with at least one other person. And that being said, if you have some stories of your own, don't hesitate to reach out. I've had multiple listeners on already, and I'd love to have more. Everybody has amazing stories, and I want to tell them all. So that's it, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. Thank you again, Mark, for coming on. Now, everybody, get out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.